Hey, and welcome to another Tech Tuesday. This is Chad from Ascension Worship. Today we're going to be talking about DCAs.
Hey, what do you say? Yes, it's that time again. It's Tech Tuesday.
So a real quick look at what DCAs are. First of all, today we're using the Behringer X32. A lot of churches have these now, and they're pretty easy to work with. Your console may look a little bit different, but the concepts are still going to be the same. So a DCA is a fader that can control a group of faders. So for a quick example, if I was doing something from scratch, imagine these four faders here are a string quartet, and I've taken the time to get the mix just right. And so maybe this is a cello, and I like that cello a lot, but there's a violinist over here that's not doing a great job, so I'm going to kind of hide them a little bit. And so I get this mix that I like the way it sounds, but I want to be able to turn it up and down in certain sections and not have to grab four faders to do it, because either it's just too much for me to do, or maybe I'm not always on this page, I'm looking at something else, but I need to be able to get to that very quickly. That's where you're going to use a DCA to control the volume up and down and to control the mute. And that's essentially all the DCA does. There's no other processing involved. So on this console, it's very easy. You take your DCA. Right now, this one says drums and bass, but just for example, we're going to use that. If you hold down the select button, anything that's in that group will light up. Nothing's lighting up on here, but I'm going to hold down select and then hit the select for the inputs that I want to be in there. And now they're controlled by that DCA. So if I hit mute, you'll see they all start to flash mute so that you know something outside the channel strip is causing them not to make sound. And if you turn that fader up and down, you can't see it, but it's turning these up and down proportionally. Now using an app, I'm going to show you visually kind of what that looks like. If you're turning those up and down, they will proportionally go up and down with the DCA. The concept being that you would most likely want to mix your DCA at 0, get your levels where you want them so they sound good there, and 0 is your home base. So that means that 9 times out of 10, that's going to sound great in your service. But for the one spot where maybe the strings really need to pop out, you can push it above the 0 mark. And then for the times when it's just too much and it's maybe fighting with the vocal, then you can go below. But again, once you get to the meat of your song, 9 times out of 10, this is at least a good starting point to work from. So this is your overall level. And of course, you can come back to your individual channels to make individual mix changes. But this is just a quick way to get to 8 things very fast and to have control over those things that you need. I see a lot of confusion sometimes on how people use their DCAs. The most important thing is to understand that it's a way of not having to do a lot of fader flipping. It's a way to grab multiple faders at once. So one thing that's always kind of bothering me is sometimes people will use a DCA for their bass guitar. I don't know if that's really necessary because it's usually only one channel. So if you notice on my DCA, this is a kind of a typical setup I would do for a church. First of all, I color coordinate things. So if you notice, the most important 3 in the center are the red ones because those control your entire worship team. So I can mute or unmute the entire team with just one hand, 3 buttons. Very, very easy. So to the left of that, I've got my band kind of broken down into pieces. I like to put my drums and bass together because those are the rhythm section of your band. Electric guitars, or in this case, I'm going to have guitars, both electric and acoustic are on this one channel here. I've got my keys and my tracks. So for today's example, we'll have keys and there's a pad sound that will be blended in there together. And then my entire band, all my worship leaders, either that's just one person or 2, whoever's leading the songs the most during the service. And then finally, any other backing vocalists for the band. This one's kind of up for grabs. I like to use it for my delay, so I can automate the delay up and down as we go. And then finally, very, very important that you have the pastor's microphone on a DCA. Again, for transitions, maybe you're working on something, on this other page over here, and you can't get to the pastor's microphone. For this example, I have my mic over on the 3rd layer. It'd be too much for me to try and move around and do things like that. So I have it on DCA, and so you can hear my voice, like Ace Ventura. I can turn it up and down here, and I can be doing whatever I need with my mix on my left side, but I've always got control over my pastor. Also, too, if you remember from the gain episode, we don't want to have improper gain structure. So if I'm looking at my DCA, again, I set it at 0 so that I can have my fader, if you can see that over here, at whatever volume it needs to be at to give me the appropriate volume for the room. And I'm not necessarily mixing it at 0, the individual fader, because for me to do that, I'd probably have to undergain it because it's not appropriate, volume for the room. And so therefore that's going to affect all my stuff in the chain. Again, go back and watch that video. It'll all be explained. But I understand the reasoning behind it is that you want to have that point you can get to very quickly that sounds good. So instead of trying to remember, because this is about -6, trying to remember -6 is a proper volume isn't going to work for you every time. So instead, you've got your DCA over here on my right-hand side, and that's going to always be sounding good at 0 because that's how I mixed it. So that's a really good way to get that approach that you want and not sacrifice your gain structure on your individual channel. All right, we're going to go into some examples here. I've got a pre-recorded song that we're going to play with. Again, I've got it broken down into these sections: drums and bass, all the guitars, electric and acoustic, keys and pads, band, worship leader. There is no BVs in this track, but I'll go ahead and push those up. Then I've got a delay send, so I can do ramping effects with the delay if I need to. And then this won't get turned up and down, but this is my microphone. So you'll notice as we get going, everything for the most part will be straight across. But when there's like a guitar solo, I'll boost the guitars up. There will be several times in this song. This is where it's important to know your songs. There's several times in the verses where the keys are just a little bit too much compared to the vocals. So there's always like this kind of seesaw action happening where I always want to make sure the vocals are on top. But that doesn't always mean I'm going to push the vocals up. Sometimes I'll just turn down what's fighting them. And that brings up a good point too. When you're sound checking, it's really nice to don't hit mute, but turn your DCAs up and down from time to time, just so you can hear, okay, is there something fighting with something else? So a lot of times I'll listen to my drums and bass, I'll listen to my guitars, I'll listen to my keys, and then I'll listen to drums and bass and guitars, or I'll listen to drums and bass and keys. I'll listen to these two together. You kind of break it down into sections, and you can figure out issues with your mix and make sure it sounds really good all the way through. But especially compared to the vocal. So again, you'll see there'll be times where I'll turn the keys down a little bit for one section, and then once the meat of the song comes back in, they'll come back up to their regular volume. So there's a lot of little automation tricks that are happening here. So let's get into it, and we'll take a listen to the song. All right, let's take a listen. Are we coming up on the verse? So if my keys are at full volume, they're fighting just a little bit. That's with no keys. So I'm probably going to keep them about here for now. Turn up a little bit of guitar right here.
Full of love and mercy, you are kindness. No one can compare, and you are good.
Maybe give it a little bit more effects.
Beautiful and holy is your name.
There's a guitar solo coming up here. Some drums.
Tear every stronghold down and break every bondage now.
control things with my left hand to turn them up and down. So I'm going to turn those tambourines down just a little bit. It's still being controlled by this mix, but I have individual control over on the side. I like to automate my effects in these kind of moments. And he's gonna be kind of breathy in here, so when the band comes up, I'm gonna give him a little bit of boost on his DCA. Jump up in volume. Kill the effects. Notice that all my DCAs are at 0 for this moment. And there's a guitar outro coming up here. Fade my entire band out, vocals and band, with just these 3 faders here. Another note on that, when you have a lot of backing vocals, which we don't in this recording, in a live scenario, if you have 4 or more backing vocals, and they each have compression and effects and all these kinds of things going on with them, when the pastor comes on stage, you will find there's a little bit of his microphone picking up in all their mics, and all those effects and everything. It just makes the pastor a little bit harder to understand. So in those transitionary moments, this is really useful. One of the first things I'll do is turn my BVs either all the way off or almost all the way off. I'll turn my worship leaders down, depending on the scenario. If they're about to come back up, I'm not going to turn them very far down. But that will immediately clean up your stage noise quite a lot. And of course, in those moments, you can be turning your band down. So again, you're not having to try and turn your pastor up really loud, and now you're getting different feedback and that kind of thing happening. So you can drop your band down to whatever is an appropriate level and keep your pastor at the top. And then once you go back into worship, if that's what you do, then you can start to ramp it back up again to 0. A lot of times coming out of a message, I will start the band at a lower level, like -5 or -10, because there might be a bit of a hard transition going from just somebody speaking to a full band. But as the song progresses, you can take the people on a journey and then end up getting them at that full volume by the end of it, and that's fine. All right, one more note for those of you who do use the Behringer X32. If you haven't already set this up, one thing you'll find is when you hit mute on your DCAs, you may not see what's happening to the channels. You might not see them flash like we've got set up over here. That could mean two things: either that you haven't updated your firmware recently. I think the most recent version right now is 2.16, or you have updated your firmware, but you haven't hit the option that gives you that flashing. Which I think is very helpful so that you can know why am I not getting sound, instead of freaking out and messing things up. It's like, okay, if something's flashing, that means it's being muted either by a mute group or a DCA. So the way to set that up, first of all, update your firmware. You can go online to figure out how to do that. But once you've done that, on the X32 screen, go to Setup, Config, and then there's an option under Mute System that says DCA groups. Make sure that is selected, because if it's not, this would still not let sound through, but now you're not seeing the mute flash. So make sure you have that selected. Very, very, very helpful when it comes to problem solving. Again, with the Behringer, one more thing you can know. So of course you can hold down Select, and you can cycle through your different banks to see anything that's lit up green is what's in that DCA, being affected by the DCA. But you can also, too, because you can have multiple DCAs affect one channel, if you select the channel, you will see on the screen, hopefully you can see this with my camera, it says DCAs, and it lights up the ones that are on. So I've got a guitar channel selected, and it's showing 2 and 4, which are guitars and my band, are both affecting that DCA. So if either one of those is muted, then that's muted. If either one of those is turned up or turned down, then that will turn up or turn down that channel. Also, one final note for you, another final note. We'll see how many of those I do. You can use DCAs for more than just input channels. So in this case, we're mostly doing our band. But like you'll notice on this one, I have my delay. You could do it two different ways. I could either have it on the delay return, which is on this third bank here, or what I'm doing, which is kind of cool, is I have it on the delay send. And so that allows me to do ramping effects, like what guitarists do with a volume pedal and a delay pedal on their board. So you can put these DCAs on anything that you can find over on these left-hand channels. So that even means if you have issues with multiple stage monitors, where sometimes you need to turn them up and down because again, when the pass rate's on stage, maybe the volume of the keyboard coming through is just too much, but it's fine during worship, then I could take all my different wedge mixes that I have. So we'll imagine that these are my wedge mixes, and I can select those and put those on DCA, and then turn that up and down when the pastor's on stage to drop the volume of the stage monitors just for that time. Just make sure you remember that you put it back at 0 when you're done. Otherwise, they're going to be playing a full worship set without being able to hear at full volume. So cool trick. You can use that. Again, DCAs will work on anything over on the left-hand side of a Behringer X32 or Midas M32. Again, this is Chad from Ascension Worship. I hope this has been helpful for you and your team. Come back here every Tuesday for more Tech Tuesday.